this is Dr. Scharf for Science Tidbit. This time of year, those people that have allergies have a real hard time. The trees, the grasses, the climbing rows that I have behind me produce huge amounts of pollen. So what is the function of pollen? How can it be of a benefit? We'll take a closer look.
When you ask people about pollen, their first response will be something about flowers and bees. Let us first take a closer look at plants and why pollen is so important. If you remember from your basic biology, most flowers actually have male and female parts. So depending on whether the flower needs to be cross-fertilized or it is self-fertilized, the pollen that resides on the anthers needs to travel to the stigma. What you see above you are anthers of a lily, and that granular appearance are literally millions of pollen grains. So essentially, the pollen, which is a sperm cell, needs to travel to the pistil and hence fertilize the ovary. So if it was not for fertilization, we would not have such an abundance of fruits and vegetables. Nevertheless, we all know that pollen season can be a challenge to many. An individual's response to breathing in pollen is met by our own immune system response, which is an allergic reaction, hence the term allergies. Now let's turn our attention to pollen itself. Pollen comes in a wide array of sizes and shapes. As a result, because pollen is indicative of a particular plant, pollen is used by paleontologists to determine what herbaceous dinosaurs were eating, or date particular stratigraphic beds. Now let's turn our attention to a group of organisms that use pollen as a food source. Numerous species of insects, bees, wasps, ants, beetles, flies, butterflies, and moths, along with mites and spiders and birds consume pollen, and they are called pollivores. So what nutritional value does pollen really have? Now this idea of pollen's nutritional value is a matter of scale. Actually, an insect eating pollen would be similar to us eating a grain of rice, or for that matter, a bowl of rice. So what are the nutritional components of the pollen grain, and where are they found within the structure of the pollen grain? The pollen grain is a relatively simple structure. However, the components of the pollen are made up of a variety of biochemical substances important for life. In the diagram that you see, the exine and the intine are made up of complex carbohydrates, which are sugars, and lipids, which are fats, both very important for cellular structure in any animal. Additionally, pollen contains roughly 23% protein and 11% essential amino acids. Remember, amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. The significance of the essential amino acids is that organisms cannot break down or manufacture those for themselves. They must rely on taking them in via food. Furthermore, pollen has essential vitamins and minerals, not easily attainable by any other means. In hindsight, the pollen grain is a multivitamin supplement. It has all components essential for life. This is why there is an entire industry that has evolved around bee pollen supplements. Moreover, bees themselves do not need to consume anything more than nectar and pollen. These two substances supply all that is metabolically required. The twist to the bee story is that raw pollen is neither sufficiently digestible or sufficiently nourishing. Pollen has to be stored in the honeycomb and fermented into what is known as bee bread. Pollen itself is protected by cellulose and wax, not digestible. Therefore, bees store the pollen, mixing it with digestive enzymes, honey, and bacteria. It is both the enzymes and the bacteria that break down pollen into the usable components. Once the bee bread has been fermented and broken down, it can be used to feed young and the adult bees themselves. One final note of interest is that honeybees have evolved a way of extra-oral digestion, much like spiders. As a result, there is less of a need for a more complex digestive system. So the next time you sneeze due to allergies, just know there's a little bit more to pollen than just your nose.